happy Easter season, everyone, and happy Thursday to all of you. We were just mentioning here that Easter is not just a day, of course, but it's a season, and it goes all the way up until Pentecost, which this year is June 8th. So it is coming up, which is crazy to think that we are at May 22nd. At least it's crazy for me to think we are at May 22nd and June is around the corner. And I know in the office, it's actually been a really quiet day. Just because we've had so many people who are not in the office today. They're either, like Pastor Ben is traveling, and so I just got word from him that he is on the ground in Minneapolis and making his way towards Wisconsin. So safe travels, Pastor Ben. You don't need to be watching while you're driving. It's okay if you pause for a moment, and then you can watch us later. That's quite all right. And for I think just everybody else, it's been. We had our bookkeeper, Barb, was in the office for a moment, but then she took off. And so it's been, well, Susan at the front desk, and then we had Phil and the tech team come on in later. But otherwise, it was really quiet, although some days are quiet is good because there was a lot of work to do. Vacation Bible School coming up, and so there is tons of just little activities and all kinds of stuff that need to be prepped, need to be organized, and it was good to get a day when I could start to work on some of that. But things always come up, though, even when it's a quiet day. So, but it's very good, and thankful to be enjoying this time with all of you on a Thursday. So, with that, we have over the weekends, we have been in a series that has been taking a look at our mission statement, which is Real People, Inclusive God, Radical Grace, and Inspired Growth. And last week, we talked about what it means to have an inclusive God. The week before that we are real people. And all of these, I think, when you look at our mission statement, at least for me personally, each one of those words on the mission statement, they all they connect to one another. It is because we are real people that we need an inclusive God. We need radical grace. It all comes together. It all ties together. And so our music has been reflecting of that and what it means to have a God that last week that includes every single one of us, ordinary, real people, just as we are. We have a God who loves and cares for us and watches over us each and every day. And so there was a song that was offered, I believe it was offered over the communion time at 9:30, called Ordinary People. And so this is I believe we've done it before. Yeah, but I thought it was a beautiful song, and so I think we're going to take some time, and we'll see if our tech team can find it here, this Ordinary People.
Just like me and you.
ordinary people. And just a little reflection there, and reminder too that God does use ordinary people. I think, well, I know in my life at least, we dismiss, or I just can dismiss some of the small moments and forget that God is working in the little things and the tiny little moments, and that God is present and helping out people. And I know meeting at youth group and taking some time with some of our youth and having some of these little conversations that they can be easy to dismiss. They can be easy to say, oh, I have more important things, or I have something better to do. And I remember specifically last night, just sitting down and chatting with a few of these kids, which could have just take it or leave it. I had other things to do at the time, but to really listen to them and to be able to share together, there's something wonderful about those moments, and taking those ordinary, simple moments and to have the faith that our God can be using those little things. That to me is what the ministry is all about. And when we neglect to look for those, or when we dismiss that, or say I'm in a rush and I've got to move to something else, or I've got to be somewhere else, or I've got to go somewhere else, we forget what our true calling actually is, and what is most important. I know one of the illustrations I've used, it's been a while ago that I used this illustration, but it's memorable to me. But it is Malcolm Gladwell uses this analogy, but he talks about a study that was done on seminary students, and these seminary students were told to go and go to this other building, go to this other room, and along the way they were going to stage this situation that kind of looked like the Good Samaritan situation, where somebody was laying down on the road who needed help. And these seminary students who went to school, obviously, to help others and to share the good news, majority of them passed by this person, didn't even go by. And they tried a number of different things. They said, as you go, we want you to think about what it means to the Good Samaritan story. We want you to think about all of that. And still, vast majority of seminary students just would pass this person by. And I think that's majority of people. That's not just to pick on seminary students, but most of us just pass that person by. And it wasn't until the one thing that really bumped up the numbers was when they said to these students, we want you to go to this other building, but know that you have plenty of time. So just leave space and go. You have plenty of time, but we'll meet you over there at that other building. And when they were told, you have plenty of time, that's when these students actually paused and asked this person, hey, do you need help? Do you need something? What can we do for you? And that's so meaningful, because I'm often rushing through life. I'm often saying, hey, don't have time for this, don't have time for that. And to live in a way where we have time. We've been blessed to take advantage of all the good moments. Let's not let those slip away. These ordinary moments, the moments that we judge to be ordinary. I took a few verses from the book of Acts today. And in the book of Acts, in chapter 4, so two of Jesus' disciples, in the book of Acts, by this time, Jesus it says he's ascended into heaven, so the disciples are kind of left to run and share the good news on their own, even though they felt pretty ordinary themselves. But it's up to them now, and Jesus says, I trust you, you can do this. And so Peter and John, two of the disciples, they had gone out, they had healed people, cared for people, but they're brought in front of the authorities, when the authorities are saying, hey, where did this come from? What is the deal with this? And the authorities, who had heard Peter preaching, and they thought, well, he must have been trained in some way, he must have been taught in some way. And when they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized they were unschooled, ordinary men. They were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Ordinary people, and all on a journey, God with us on this ordinary journey, but just doing what we can and realizing, hey, we're all part of this, and God gives us, and believing in that. So that was in chapter 4. And then you get to chapter 6. And in chapter 6, the disciples were starting to run into a problem. There were actually a number of people who were following Christ. And as all these people following Christ, there was a problem in, how are we going to distribute food to all the people? How are we going to care for all the people? And so they decide to elect people. They're known as deacons today. That's the word that is actually translated, but they're seen as helpers. They're seen as people who want to help the cause, and they're elected to be a part of this. And so it says, brothers and sisters, let's choose 7 people from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom, and they can help wait on the tables is the language that they're using, but they're talking about serving food to all people who need it, and they will give attention to this. And they chose 7 very ordinary people from the group. And what's fascinating about this is that these 7 people were elected to, as they put it, wait on tables, but help distribute food. But what we find after this, I'm not going to read the rest of chapter 6, 7, 8 and following, because these people are in the rest of those chapters. But one thing that's fascinating, they're elected to go and distribute food. But what we find is that all of them are called to something much, much deeper. They're called to go and one of the people who is called is the person Pastor Ben was talking about in his sermon message on Sunday, a man named Philip. And Philip was called to go to Samaria, and then he was called to travel on the wilderness road and winds up talking to this man from Ethiopia. And their lives are filled with all kinds of calls. So they're called in one way, but it's just God is going to choose to work in a multitude of ways. And that's for each of us, that we are each called. And it's surprising where that path takes us. Like it wasn't just, for them, it wasn't just waiting on tables. It was going forth into all the world. And their journey continued into all these places. And finally, there's a story in Acts chapter 14. And this is with Paul, who we know wrote much of the New Testament, many of the letters in there anyway. And Paul and a man named Barnabas, and they are traveling, healing people, and once again, when the people start to notice them, their words to them, when the people come up to them and they ask, how are you doing these things? You must be gods. And they actually name them Zeus and Hermes, which, I don't know, I've never been called a god after I preached, but apparently they were. And so they're called Zeus and Hermes. Apparently Barnabas was called Zeus, the king of all gods, and Paul was called Hermes, which I think is kind of interesting anyway. I think that's kind of fun. But Paul and Barnabas say to these people, friends, why are you doing this? We are ordinary people like you. We are bringing you good news, telling you to turn to the living God. And so going out there and saying, hey, we're simply here to share the good news and to bring that hope. And I think that's a reminder. When good things happen, when difficult things happen, that God is working through us in these ordinary moments. And that's the hope for each and every one of us today, to be able to see that and to live into that. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. And so we have all kinds of things that are coming up with our summer schedule, everything else. But as far as everything else goes, this weekend we hope to see you, whether it's on Saturday evening or Sunday morning in either online or in person for worship. But it is a blessing, as always, to have you with us. And Philip is in the building, so Philip, you want to take it away?